So one of the final components of pre-K for me that we haven't discussed is this one. Let's find out about it. Often it's referred to that way, but in writing, we often use the initials LFOAI. So if you see that on a lesson plan or referenced in any of the other pre-K for me documents, that's what it means. Let's find out about it. And I don't know how this one escaped me when I was thinking originally, but when I was planning for one of the other PD webinars we've had, I realized that I never planned this one. So, so as always, stop me if you're confused, stop me if you have a question, either speak right out or use the chat box. My right-hand man, Marcy, is here to help. So she'll interrupt me as always, or just respond in the chat box if it's not something that the greater population needs to be made aware of right away. So let's get into this. So what is, let's find out about it. So essentially it's another whole group time during the curriculum. And it was brought to my attention, and it's a really good point, that a lot of these components seem to be whole group. So I'm gonna touch upon that once we get through the what, why, and when of Let's Find Out About It, because you're right, it does seem like a lot of these discussions that we've been having have been said, this is a whole group, this is a whole group, this is a whole group. So I just sort of want to walk you through what it looks like and what we expect out of that. And so Let's Find Out About It is more geared towards sort of a mini lesson, okay? It's a really, as everything else, intentional lesson, and it's done in a very intentional way. It's about 10 to 20 minutes long, especially in the beginning of the year. So of course, in the first unit, you're not going to have a 20-minute long Let's Find Out About It. It's going to be a lot quicker than that. Sometimes they're even shorter than 10 minutes, depending on what the concept is that you're instructing. And then as students become used to the expectation during that time and used to the routine of it, it can extend longer than that 8 to 10 to 12 minutes, and that would be appropriate. So during this time, the teacher shows, they model, they explain, they demonstrate. It's a very much teacher-led activity. It's generally not a question and answer, okay? It's not as much of a give and take from the teacher and the students the way other activities are. This is more of a, I'm the teacher, I'm showing you a concept, and you're just sort of following along. With that said, there is obviously going to be an opportunity where students are going to comment or ask a question on what's being presented, and you as the teacher need to decide if it's worth acknowledging that or not. If you think it's a question or a misunderstanding that the rest of the group is going to have, then certainly stop and just sort of reevaluate what you're doing to make it more clear, okay? But it's not going to be as much of a raise your hand if, or tell me what you're thinking about this type of situation. It's much more just instructing on a concept. There is, though, a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Participation from the students, and you'll see that. I do have a quick video to show today as well, so you'll see sort of what that looks like. So why do we bother doing this type of purposeful instruction with 4-year-olds, right? Because it can sound, and when you read it, it can seem like it's a very sort of academic, rigorous piece of the curriculum, but that's not the intent so much. So it's meant to have content that, like everything else, is derived from the narrative stories that you read during read aloud, okay? So similar to how those read aloud stories are pushed out into centers and used again during small groups, and even sometimes during SWPO. Let's Find Out About It is a time where you take those concepts from the read aloud and you build it even bigger, okay? So for example, Max's dragon shirt, he gets a stain on his shirt. So of course you read the story. During centers allow the students to pretend play and dramatic play with laundry mats and cleaning clothes. They let them sort of discover and work through the concepts from the story in the water table with soap and fabric. At the art table at the library center, they're researching more about about stains and colors, okay? But in Let's Find Out About It, you're taking those vocabulary terms like stained or fade, and building them even bigger and broader into how it even relates to the student's life even more, okay? So it's getting beyond sort of that surface level definition of fade or definition of stain and building the concept bigger. An important part of this time is that it provides factual information and builds vocabulary, concept development, and builds upon background knowledge, okay? So some students are gonna come to you with an understanding of what a stain is and how a stain might get there, especially on fabric and on their clothing. But don't assume other children understand how it got there or how to remove it, right? So you're building that concept around what that student individually has come to the table with as a knowledge base. Students will gain exposure to and modeling of use of expository text. So expository text is different than narrative, right? So a narrative text is what we're using during read aloud. An expository text is going to give factual information to a student. So it's a nonfiction textbook. It's not used in all Let's Find Out About It activities, but certainly it's going to be available in the Library Center for students to use, or maybe through other centers. So this is an area where you're building off of an expository text, okay, factual information. It introduces concepts systematically and helps teachers and children at small groups and center time. So like I said earlier, those concepts from Read Aloud are built in throughout all of the other activities, and this is one more area where that's done. So keeping in mind that children need opportunities to grapple with a topic. Okay, so during Read Aloud, you're introducing vocabulary words, you're giving students opportunities during centers to build on that, but remember during centers, it can be very child-led. So just because you want the children to experiment with stains and washing in the discovery table doesn't mean that's what they're gonna do when they're there. So Let's Find Out About It is a chance for them to come together and grapple with that topic, grapple with a vocabulary word, grapple with a concept, and just sort of untangle it for them, okay? Children need time provided for them to process information, okay? So again, it's much more centered on this activity and providing the information and giving them time to sort of process that. Children need help noticing new features that previously escaped their attention. To minimize this. And to learn which features are relevant or irrelevant to a particular concept. So an example might be students in Maine often are familiar with chipmunks and squirrels, right? It's something that they see at home, something they see at school, on the road, in the park. It's not always a new concept. What is a new concept to them might be that squirrels and chipmunks are different. They have a lot in common, right? They're small little woodland creatures. They live in the forest, they climb trees, they eat acorns. Sometimes they can be a nuisance in your yard and you don't want them there. They have 4 little legs, they have a big bushy tail, lots of things that make them the same. But what you want to do is show them that they're not the same, they're different. Squirrels tend to be a little bit chunkier, they're gray. Chipmunks are smaller, they're brown, and they have a stripe down their tail. Okay, so Let's Find Out About It is a time for you to introduce to children that feature like that in whatever concept you're doing that they might not have noticed before. Okay, and then that's going to translate into other activities throughout their day and throughout their world. Okay, paying attention to detail. Children need adults who model thinking. So this is my favorite, and this is my favorite part of Let's Find Out About It too, because it's such a great time to show students what it looks like to process information and to ask questions and to think bigger, okay? So during this time, you're saying things like, I wonder what would happen if I squirted this ketchup on this shirt, something, okay? I'm thinking that if I squirt the ketchup on the shirt, and then try and clean it off, I wonder if it's gonna wipe clean like it would on a table, okay? And so modeling that for them. Instead of saying, if I squirt ketchup on this fabric and then try and clean it off, it's gonna leave a stain. Okay, that's just telling them information. But modeling it, modeling how you're thinking about that and why you're thinking about it is a much bigger lesson learned for the students and modeling technique that we want to be practicing. And children also need prompting from adults to know where to focus attention. So watch as I do this, or look here, or what do you notice between this and this? And children need feedback about what they know and why it may be correct or incorrect. So Marcy thinks that I squirt this ketchup on the shirt and I wipe it off, it's gonna wipe off clean. Let's check it out, okay? Versus saying, no, that's not right. If I squirt ketchup on a shirt and try and wipe it, it's gonna leave a stain, right? So you're modeling, that's a good idea, let's try it. Let's figure it out. Let's see if that's right. Who agrees, who disagrees, things like that. So when do we do Let's Find Out About It? In a full day session, it's typically 2 or 3 times a week, assuming your full day, 5 days a week, okay? Not every day. In a half day session, of course, it's naturally gonna be less, about once or twice a week. So this is another one of those components where you're not doing it every single day. It's sort of up to, it's on the schedule of when you could be doing it, but depending on you and your classroom structure, when that plays out is up to you. Okay, so let's look at a quick lesson plan. So we've been doing Unit 4, and I'll look at Week 1. And sometimes when we code our lesson plans, we use this feature, the U4W1 for Unit 4, Week 1. You'll see that sometimes on different observation tools that we use. I'll give this a second to load. So I'm just going to take you to our Pre-K for Me curriculum page from the DOE website. Okay, so here we are in Pre-K for Me. Down at the bottom is the units, and we're in Unit 4, World of Color. So Unit 4, Week 1, let's find out about it. You'll see all of these lessons are here, okay? All these lesson plans and all the resources are here. It's up to you to look at the schedule, so if I'm a full day classroom, to figure out which lesson is expected on which day. Because remember, they're all in order and they align with the story read aloud. I'm just opening up the full day schedule for Unit 4, Week 1. And you'll see as you scroll down, Let's Find Out About It is under the whole group lessons. So on Monday, or day 1 of that week, you're doing maps. On day 2 of that week, it's a large group math activity. On day 3, you're doing washable permanent colors activity for Let's Find Out About It. And then on day 4, you do Let's Find Out About It color fading. And day 5 is a day where you could do another lesson on Let's Find Out About It, or if you have a social emotional curriculum, something like that. So for today's purposes, I was going to look at Let's Find Out About It color fading. So here I have color fading, and I see that it has a resource, but I'm going to look at the lesson plan first. And it's a quick 1-page lesson plan. So you'll notice right out of the gate that there's nothing to really prepare. It says set up materials. Your materials is the book, Max's Dragon Shirt, some colored construction paper that's cut into strips, some tape. Okay, so pretty easy prep. Some vocabulary you're going to want to focus on: stain, fade, experiment, or try something, and predict. And then it gives you some brief language that you could use to introduce the lesson. Okay, so you might say something like, in Max's Dragon Shirt, Max spilled ice cream on his dragon shirt. What do you notice? Okay, and you're going to open up the book to that page, show the students the illustrations, and just let them respond. Okay, and then you can go through. So this is here as guidance for you. You don't have to say this verbatim. Based on how you introduce the lesson and what children respond to what your question of what do you notice, and based on how you are going to model your thinking and model the process for this activity, you may or may not get to these other specific scripted areas, okay? So don't feel like you need to go through this verbatim. Just keep in your mind the overall goal of the lesson and the vocabulary words that you want to be highlighting for them, okay? So you'll see in this activity as you read through, you're explaining how you are going to use these different colored strips of construction paper, and you're going to put them into a folder, okay? So it covers half of it, and then you're going to place the folder in the window. One of them is going to be labeled with the label 1 week, and the other one is going to be labeled 3 weeks. So you'll explain that in 1 week, you'll see what happened to the construction paper in the window, okay? And then in 3 weeks, you'll follow up. So there was a resource for this, and I just want to go back and see what that was. So this was just a step-by-step visual to use with the students. So you'll have the strips of paper prepared. You'll place them in the envelope, label them, like I said, 1 week, 3 week, okay, and then test it. So I've seen teachers do this using the same color of paper, like all red, all green, all blue, something. In this lesson, it has 3 different colored papers. In other lessons, I've seen them use file folders, you know. So your materials, just because it says it is what it is, knowing the goal of the lesson, right? So the plan is to show students how the sun fades colors, right? And ultimately, the darker the color or the darker the paper, the more obvious the fading is, okay? And then, of course, over time, 3 weeks versus 1 week, there's more fading happening, especially if you've had consistent sunny days in the window, okay? So if that point can be made using a different material than construction paper, or using different colors or all the same color, that's fine. Just know what the point of the lesson is and how you're going to get there. In this lesson too, they talk about color fast and non-color fast. That'll come up when you go to look at the 1 week and the 3 week results of your color fading. So I'm going to stop there for a minute. Is there any questions or thoughts that are coming to you thus far?
No questions in the chat room, but Jamie did say that she still has her color paper strips up in her windows, and that they're going to be really faded.
They are going to be faded, Jamie.
Yeah.
That would be a great thing to go in and get it and like make a video for your students to show them.
That's what I was thinking. To send them pictures.
That's funny. Okay, good. So I'm going to move on then and show the video that I have. So this is a video of a pre-K teacher, of course. And she's in her classroom with her students. Can't see the students. Hopefully everybody's access to sound and internet will be strong enough so that you can hear and see it great. It's a pretty good quality video as far as there's not a lot of jumbling and moving around like the last one. Oops. Oh my goodness. I just have the spinning wheel of death, so bear with me for a minute. This worked perfectly yesterday.
So today, boys and girls, we're going to do Let's Find Out About It, about things that fade. You remember we read yesterday Max's dragon shirt, and in it, his pants were all...
Oh, come on.
So long. It did change on it in the house. It was in the sun a lot. It in
Okay. So what did you notice about this teacher's instruction of this lesson and the lesson plan that we reviewed quickly?
I noticed that she gave several examples of how the paper had faded. I especially liked when she placed the shapes on top of the paper. So it was more obvious, that you could see the color that it was and the color that it is now. And then she showed the different things from around her home, that could connect to their natural environment and how things fade in their own houses.
Exactly. Yep. Perfect.
She was frequently using the buzzwords, the vocabulary words, and explaining them.
Yep. And she even added a new one. Well, it was a new one to this lesson plan, but in other lesson plans, you'll see that they talk about items that are opaque. So she brought that in. That was from a different lesson and from a different concept, but she used it again here because it was relevant, right? With those shapes, they were opaque and the light did not shine through them.
Melissa in the chat room pointed out, and I agree, she gave the students a lot of chances to ask questions and inquire. And I like that she took the time, like the thought process you could see was happening there.
Exactly, yeah. And I love that so like one of the questions the students had at the end was why that piece of paper hadn't faded, and she explained because it hadn't been in the sun. But further than that, she explained where it was and why the sun couldn't reach it, right? It was in the closet down the hall where it's dark. The sun can't get in that closet. And versus just saying, oh, we keep this in the closet, and not explaining why the closet doesn't have sun and why the closet's dark, right? And it didn't take long. That whole video was the whole lesson, and it was 6.5 minutes. Yeah, I thought of that too, Colleen. I thought this video is going to make everybody miss their classrooms and miss their kids. So the other thing I wanted you to notice about her in that video is that she didn't, like I was saying, in the lesson plan where it has some scripted ideas, she strayed from that. Okay, so the lesson plan didn't talk about bringing in items from home or bringing items in that could connect to students' real lives, but she did that above and beyond the lesson plan, and that's okay. In fact, that even made the lesson better, right? Because it makes it much more relatable for the students. So it's okay to do that. These lesson plans are here for you as a guide for the concept for lesson, let's find out about it, and the goal of the vocabulary words and the goal of the concepts you want to build. But if there are ways that you can enhance it the way this teacher did, then I strongly encourage you to do that, especially if it's not going to make that time much longer. There was another one I observed once in a different unit that was around water repelling or absorbing into materials. And the teacher had brought in umbrellas, snow boots, rain boots, sneakers, and she tested them all with water to show the students how they either absorb or repel. So if it's raining, why do we wear rain boots and use an umbrella, right? Or in the summer, if it's dry, it's okay to wear sandals because, things like that are great ways to enhance lessons for students. What did you notice about the students? I know you couldn't see them, and that's fine, but any thoughts around their participation or attention that you could gather from that?
They sounded like they were engaged because they kept we could hear them talking and making comments showing that they were listening to what she was saying and interested.
Right.
Kelly pointed out that they also were quiet and attending.
Right. They were quiet. A couple times the student would call out, but she didn't stop. Right? If it wasn't relevant, if it was just something that was distracting, she didn't stop. She just kept going. She ignored it. And it stopped. It didn't escalate. So now, mind you, this is a Unit 4 lesson, so we're talking about like late February, March-ish. So these students have been exposed to this type of expectation throughout the year. It's not like it's a September, October where they're still getting used to it. So there has been a level of routine for them. It was okay for them to call out too. She didn't take time to say, raise your hand if. Some activities you want them to raise your hands and you just need to preempt it that way, okay? Raise your hand, I'm gonna ask a question and raise your hand if you know the answer, right? But in this activity, it was okay for the students to just call out and it worked. Any other last minute questions or thoughts on that? I had another video too of this lesson that was a pinch longer. It was like about 8 minutes. The quality wasn't great though, but if anybody wants another video to observe, just let me know and I'm happy to give you the link to that. It's all in that video also though, there's students visible, and so I just am leery about sharing videos like that. But it's the same, it's just another variation of this same lesson plan. So I was going to move on to next to chat briefly, if this will move, about your schedules, your daily schedules. Because like I said earlier, my goodness, why isn't this moving, please? Okay. Like I said earlier, it had come up that a lot of these components seem to be full day, or not full day, they tend to be whole group activities. So I just wanted to take a minute and chat about that while I had you all here. So when you're looking at your daily schedule, there's certain things that are daily must-haves, especially if you're using this curriculum, right? But regardless, there's daily must-haves. There's daily, what I call optionals. And then there's activities that are out of your control as a teacher, okay? So they're sort of preset for you. So your daily must-haves for pre-K for me is, of course, we've said this every time, the read aloud, okay? The read aloud happens every day. The intro to centers and the centers happens every day, okay? So these numbers beside them are roughly the time it takes. So your read aloud is gonna be about up to 15 minutes. Intro to centers will follow more or less immediately for about 10 minutes, 8 or 10 minutes. And then your centers. So in a full day program, your centers are gonna be at least 60 minutes long. And in your half-day programs, you're looking at about 45 minutes, okay? Your other daily must-haves is, if you're a full-day program, you need to have an afternoon rest available for students. So that's about another 45 to 60 minutes of that. That might decrease as the year goes on. I imagine this time of year, you're looking at 30, 35 minutes maybe, depending on where individual students are at. Meals, of course. So regardless if you're half day or full day, you're stopping to have some type of a either meal or snack. So that's going to last, depending on what it is, 15 to 60 minutes. I say 60 minutes because full day programs often have a 20-minute breakfast, a 20-minute lunch, and then like a 15-ish minute snack typically. And then you daily must have some type of a recess or outdoor time. So in your full day programs, you're looking at about 35, 45 minutes-ish for recess. Half days a little less, 25 to 30 minutes, okay? The time frames there are somewhat flexible, especially for meals and recess. But these other curriculum components are your must-haves. So pre-K for me, daily optionals are SWIPLN, right? So we talked about that's not gonna happen every day, whether you're full day or half day. It doesn't necessarily happen every single day. Small group, let's find out about it. And then some programs use a separate social and emotional curriculum. You don't need to do that. A lot of Head Starts do though. So that's gonna be an optional depending on what you use. And then items out of your control are arrival and departure times, right? Those are set by the district, set by transportation. Often your recess and meal times are out of your control because you have to sort of, if you go in the cafeteria or coordinating meal delivery with your lunchroom staff, Sometimes you don't have say in that matter. And then a lot of programs still have specials, art, music, gym time, things like that. And often those are also out of your control. So these are the things that you need to sort of just have in the back of your mind as you're thinking about your daily schedule. Is there anything in the chat that came up around that? Saw it light up. So once you have those in your mind, you start to lay it out. So you're going to start with the non-negotiables, the arrival, departure times, recess, meals, specials, okay? Things that are more often than not out of your control. So as you sort of lay out on a piece of paper, as you're starting your schedule, plug in these pieces first, okay? Once you've got that set, then you can go back and fill it in with the rest of the pre-K for me or your curriculum must-haves daily, okay? So you're gonna see sort of what's available for time. So those large chunks of time, okay, if you can get a span that's 60 to 75 minutes long, that's a great spot to accommodate your read aloud, your intro to centers, and your centers. Okay, so you're gonna wanna scoop that up. Typically, that's in the morning. Okay, after arrival, after breakfast, sometime in that, where more often than not I see it scheduled. Your smaller chunks of time is when you're going to use for your other components, okay? So the small group, the SWIPL, the let's find out about it, math large groups, those will be filled in there. So be mindful of how many transitions students are experiencing within your day. Okay, so be mindful and thinking about how many times are students ending and starting a new activity, okay? Sort of a blunt end and a blunt start, okay? And how many times are students physically leaving the class and entering a new space? We want to minimize that. So this is another big conversation that comes up around having specials. So especially in half-day programs, there's a lot of half-day programs that those students are still going to art, still going to gym, still going to music. That arguably is a lovely experience for 4-year-olds and probably for the specials teachers, right? I don't know many that don't love having the pre-K students come. But what I want you to think about in thinking of your schedule is that conducive to your day and what you want students to experience from your classroom? Okay, so if they're physically leaving and going to new spaces, that can be really disruptive for a lot of students. If you and the specials teacher and the school agree that you still want them to experience those specials, see if it's possible for this teacher to come to you. So to bring the art to your classroom, to bring gym class to your classroom or recess, to bring music to your classroom versus having the students physically clean up and leave. The same is true for meals. If you're serving breakfast and serving lunch, whenever possible, having that in the classroom is highly recommended. I know that's not possible everywhere, and it is what it is. But if it's an option to have it in the classroom, then that would be my recommendation, okay? And then as far as blunt ending activities and starting a new one, so that's like really clear transition. So transitioning from read aloud to intro to centers is much more smooth and seamless because it's not stop this, flip the switch, do this. Okay, so that's what I mean by hard stops and hard starts. So on the pre-K, well, on our DOE site on the pre-K for me page, that we provided some sample schedules for folks to consider. And I do just want to show you where those are and how they can be helpful for you. So they're on the main page above the units. There's a sample full day schedule and a sample half day schedule. So I just want to show you the full day one first. You'll notice that in this one, read aloud happens right in the morning, 8:30, students come in, and then they go to breakfast. And then they go to come back for intro to centers and centers. So in this scenario, it's likely that breakfast mealtime was a non-negotiable. It was out of the teacher's hands, okay? Breakfast for pre-K is gonna be at 8:50 in the classroom, but students arrive at 8:30. So you have this 20-minute chunk of time where read aloud might be a good fit. Sometimes it might not be, and you might just have like tabletop activities or song and movement. I know some teachers that do a structured yoga activity, okay? It's a filler. Then you'll notice though that intro to centers and thinking and feedback are all done within this large hour and 20-minute chunk of time that was available. So they'll stop, clean up from this activity, and go outside, okay? So now they're moving, they're stretching, they're outside, being independent and having fun. In this schedule, they come back in for SWPL. So this one, SWPL, is happening every day, okay? It's about 20 minutes. And then they're doing lunch. So hopefully lunch is in the classroom, maybe not. If it's not, then it's something to consider, because in this scenario, students are transitioning from the classroom to outside, to inside, to potentially the cafeteria. That's a lot. So that might be an area where we want to look at what we could do to lessen the transition. Can we go from outside straight to lunch, perhaps? I don't know. And then it's full day, so they have a required rest. In this one, it's about 30 minutes. And then after that rest time, they're working on, depending on the day of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, these additional activities. And then they have time to move from one of these whole group activities. They break out into a small group activity and then prepare to go home. Okay, so obviously the time frames are going to be different for you all, but this is just a great way to sort of model how to set up your schedule and look at it in a way that's going to be least intrusive on students. Below that is a half-day program. This one is set for 3.5 hours. I know many are 2.5 hours. So just have to thinking of that. You'll notice too in the other schedule, as well as in this one, there's no time for specials. So a lot of schools have specials, so just keep that in mind as well. Okay, so same thing here. Read aloud, then they go to breakfast and come back for centers. If that can be avoided, I would recommend it, but it is what it is in some places. Okay, they're doing SWPL, recess, and then another whole group after recess throughout the afternoon. Okay, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they have small groups scheduled. Okay, so this is just a sample. It's not written in stone. Below that is a half-day program for 3 hours. And then there might be one for, yeah, 2.5 hours below that. Okay, so in your 2.5-hour programs, we're looking at read aloud, nice big chunk of time for intro to centers and even thinking and feedback. And then a whole group SWPL, recess, and then depending on the day, other activities. So I see my chat going.
Yeah, so quick question from Sally. She said she didn't realize rest time could be less than an hour, and is an hour the state requirement?
So good question.
I'm gonna let you tackle that one.
Yeah, thanks, Marcy. So if you have a Head Start partner, Head Start has to go by licensing rules. And if the licensing rule trumps the Chapter 124 rule, then that's what you have to do. So if licensing says that 4-year-olds need a 1-hour rest daily, then that is what it is. In 124, I believe it says the same thing without taking it out and reading it verbatim, which I could potentially do. Knowing that, or I'm sympathetic to the fact that in the beginning of the school year, when children are potentially younger, they need that longer rest time, especially if school is still a big transition for them, coming from whatever they had prior to pre-K. That rest time is going to be really important for them, just to sort of have independent, quiet time and chill out and relax and prepare for the rest of the day. Now, with that said, a lot of students, especially as the year goes on, grow out of that. They just naturally grow out of it. And trying to make them or expect them to sit and be quiet for an hour in May, personally, I think is a little much. So decreasing your expectation for rest time over time is appropriate. So, but with that said, in May, if you still have 10 students who need that 1-hour rest, then they should be provided that 1-hour rest. Okay, but if you have 10 students who are good to go after 25, 30, 35 minutes, then maybe that's a good indicator that rest time could be shorter.
The other thing, like in my classroom at the beginning of the year, some of them, it takes them like 10 minutes to fall asleep. And then, I don't want to wake them up. You know what I mean? I need that time because I don't want to have them fall asleep and then wake them up 10 minutes later because they're really they're sleeping pretty soundly. So I think they do need the time in the beginning.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If a student falls asleep, then obviously their little bodies need that, right? They need that time to just decompress and unwind it and sleep. And other students don't. They might appreciate the quiet time and be, quiet and respectful of their sleeping peers. You're bound to have one or two that are restless and don't want to rest, and you just need to sort of accommodate that for that child. But yeah, definitely. The other problem, though, but thing to think of is families' expectations of their students sleeping. So if a child's sleeping for an hour in the afternoon and then not going to bed until after 9-10 o'clock at night, then that's a conversation that the parent's going to want to have with you probably. You sort of just need to honor and respect that. But with that said, I would let the parent know, this child's sleeping because they need it. Granted, they're going to bed late at night potentially. But there's just going to be a shift over time with that. And it's just
I did have that conversation when my youngest daughter was in pre-K, because in pre-K they were sleeping for 2 hours, and I would be up till like 12 o'clock at night with her because she was so wound. So I had to ask them, please, can you wake her up at,
yeah,
after an hour.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Anne also just pointed out that in her classroom, the kids that don't sleep get to have notebooks to write or draw in.
Yeah, you definitely want an alternative activity for sure. That's a great idea. Puzzles, quiet, like the quiet phone puzzles, or quiet independent, like matching games that students can do quietly on their mat is a great one. If students continue to be loud, then or struggle with staying in their space, and sometimes that's a time that the ed tech can, take them elsewhere, or the teacher can take them elsewhere in the building to accommodate the rest of the sleeping students. So this comes up a lot too around ratios and maintaining the 1-to-8 ratio during rest time, because a lot of teachers will say, I'm struggling with these 1 or 2 students, but we can't leave the room because if I leave the room with 2 students, then my ed tech is left with 14, and that's out of ratio. While that's true on paper, it's okay. It's okay. Same like during recess, right? Like it's okay if the ratio bumps up to 1-to-9, 1-to-10, 1-to-12. Those ratios, that 1-to-8 time frame, or that 1-to-8, those pieces are really meant during these curriculum components, academic parts of the day. Okay, so during centers, during read aloud, during SWIPL, during let's find out about it, that's when those low ratios, those 1-to-8 ratios, are crucial for the experience of those children. During rest, it's okay if one adult needs to leave with 2, 3, 4 children and leave 10, 11, 12 kids with the other adults. Okay, it's okay. It's not forever. It's a short amount of time. Okay, and it's meaningful for the others. Did I just open a huge can of worms for everybody?
No.
I just want to point out that if you are partnering with a Head Start, the ratios are a little bit different in that I think the guidelines are if it's a few minutes out of the classroom out of ratio, but in general, ratios need to be the 1-to-10 or 1-to-8 need to be followed pretty much all the time.
Yeah.
So, but that's more of the Head Start guidelines trumping the child daycare actually.
And I know a lot of folks struggle too because teachers and ed techs need their breaks and need their lunch, which of course I would never argue that, but subbing somebody else during that time would be needed, right? Especially, you don't want your ed tech or your teacher to take lunch during centers, is what I'm saying, right? So during those crucial parts of the curriculum, that's when you want your two familiar classroom teachers instructing. But during outside play, if Marcy and I are the teachers in the classroom, and during outside play, Marcy needs to go to take her lunch, so they sub in Nina, that's absolutely fine. That's fine.
Yeah. even in Air Force Child Development Centers I used to work in, if the children were asleep, they didn't count as part of the, they were out, you could be out of ratio if some of the children were asleep. That was the rule, but that's why I thought maybe it'd be okay, like, you know, during, like you were saying, during rest time, if you were a little bit not in the ratio.
Right. Yeah, I'm not gonna, we're not the pre-K police. I'm not gonna come shut down your program because you had to accommodate 3 students during rest time or during outside play or something, of course not.
So Grace asked a question. She has found that sometimes kids will stay awake so they don't miss out on what the non-sleepers are doing and asking for suggestions. I would say what I personally would do, or what I would recommend, is setting a visual timer for 10 or 15 minutes and having everybody rest without activities for at least 10 minutes, because it's really good for kids to kind of learn that downtime is good, resting your body is good, and they need that. I mean, it's been a really busy day. And generally your sleepers will fall asleep in that 10 or 15 minutes. And then when the visual timer, just so everybody can see how long, the children can see how long, when it goes off, if you're non-sleepers, that's when I would offer activities or books or quiet boxes or something like that. But I would give everybody a chance to kind of settle.
Yes. Nope. I think that's a great suggestion. I know a lot of teachers too, during rest time will try and rearrange their classrooms so that mats are all straight and sort of symmetric. Don't worry about doing that. So sometimes you can be strategic about where you're putting students to rest, like, behind a shelf or, so sometimes being strategic like that can block their view of other students and say, so if you have one that's always looking to see or not wanting to miss out, then maybe they need to go in a spot where they can't see.
Mm-hmm.
But I would do Marcy's first, probably. I think that's a much better suggestion.
I might incorporate both together.
Yeah.
It's being very intentional on where you place children, because some can lay next to other children and not, they don't talk, they don't make a sound, and some really can't do that.
Right. Perfect. So it's just about 11:30. I'm just put into the chat box the form. So when was our last one? On Monday. Monday's form was glitchy again, so I'm fingers crossed this is better this time. If not, as always, I will email a certificate separately. But any last minute questions, thoughts, concerns for Let's Find Out About It or your schedules?
Can you just run through real quick where the recordings are?
Yes, I just saw that from Loyanne too. So if you go to, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. So when you're on our DOE website, or actually, probably just like, no, I can't do that either. Okay. When you're on our Pre-K for Me site, so under early childhood, and then in the left-hand column, the additional tabs will show up. And so all of these videos have been directly related to Pre-K for Me. So they're all going to be under the Pre-K for Me tab. That's on the left-hand side there. And about halfway down as you scroll, the first link is the Pre-K for Me guidance videos. So everything that we've recorded up to this point is there. I also threw in the PowerPoints that I use. My PowerPoints are not anything glamorous. They're truly just meant to sort of keep me on track and make sure I don't leave anything out. But if you find them helpful, they're there. But so they're all just held currently in a Google folder.